Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Namofsky. Today's episode, we're focusing on closing the wealth gap and the wage gap and understanding the pink tax, dismantling a financial system designed to keep women broke. Janine, before we went away, we were talking about the wage gap and the wealth gap. What role do men have in closing the wage and wealth gap?
I love this question, and I get asked it quite a bit. I think that everybody has a role in closing the wage and the wealth gap. And one of the ways that men can do this is actually by sharing their salary information with their female colleagues or women in their life. I actually experienced quite a bit of wage discrimination when I was working as an accountant in a previous role. And I was actually training a man who ended up being paid $13,000 more than I was, and we were in the same role. And I never would have known to ask for that level of salary if he hadn't shared that to me. And unfortunately, I don't remember his name, but it was something that was so impactful to me and my career.
And you know what? I think we all go through that. When we do find out that one of our male counterparts is making a lot more money, it's an aha moment for us. It's like, well, what's happening here and why? So what can women do individually to help move themselves forward financially?
Yeah, there are lots of things that women can do from a financial perspective, but I'll focus on kind of two really key areas. The first is negotiating. And I think that it's so important that women get involved with negotiating and practice negotiating. So not just once a year at your salary review, but practice negotiating your credit card interest rate or your bank fees or more data on your cell phone. These are small ways that people can practice and get comfortable negotiating so that when it comes time to the big negotiation, you have the confidence to do so. And also you're coming with a lot of data around, what other markets are paying for these types of roles, all of your accomplishments. I think those are some really key areas when it comes to negotiating. And the second part is I'm a big, big advocate of women investing. We know women don't invest as much as men. We're more risk averse. I like to say also we're more risk aware, but we know that 70% of women are keeping their money in cash. And that can be really detrimental to women's wealth building over the long term, especially because on average, the stock market returns about 10% per year. So if you're not seeing those types of returns or you don't have your money in investments, you're losing out over the long term.
Okay, so now you touched upon two really important things. I want to go back to negotiating because
Yeah.
I was never taught how to negotiate. My mother always said, ask questions. When you don't know, ask questions because, you need to understand what's happening here. I had Rita Turcher on the show. She was the first guest on Empowered. And she said that when she had, she was up for a new job, she went to a friend of hers and said, teach me how to negotiate like a white man. There's so many important things that we as women don't know. And I want to talk about chapter 16 of your book.
Okay.
My favorite chapter, ask for more. We need to negotiate, yet we don't. So what can we do to become better negotiators for ourselves?
Yeah. And we know that women aren't received as well when they negotiate, unfortunately. So there is some bias working against us that we do really need to work on as a society. But when you're preparing for negotiations, I would say if it's a salary negotiation, like know your numbers, know what other people in the industry are being paid, know what your coworkers are being paid, have that list of all of those amazing accomplishments and try and have like a numeric driver along with those. And then kind of like what your mother said, like asking open-ended questions. How can we get to a point where it is continuing to be sustainable for me to work here at the current salary? Or, what can we do to look at making this more appealing or make it so that it works for both of us? Because sometimes employers can't move on, let's say, base salary. So can you ask for another week of vacation or more stock if it's a publicly traded company? And there's also great resources out there. I have a good friend, Fotini Economopoulos, wrote the book Say Less, Get More. Amazing negotiation tips, and it's an entire book dedicated to that. So there are so many great Canadian resources out there that also aren't just coming from white men, because sometimes the things white men say or how they would negotiate don't always work for the rest of us as well.
You mentioned Fotini. When I read your book, I was like, oh, she's going to be one of the next guests that I have on the
That's
show.
awesome.
Because you know what? I want people to understand what's happening with women worldwide, within Canada, because we all need to learn from each other. When we come
Absolutely.
back from this commercial break, I want to talk about the fact that, you know, we shouldn't keep our cash in the bank and we should use it for us. So please don't go away. We'll be right back.